Hi, I'm Tim Zacharias with Cougar USA and your host of Building Value. We have a brand new episode for you today and a new format of the podcast. We're going to be changing it up a little bit, have some new kind of guest hosts and recurring guests. And we're going to be talking about what's going on in the industry, talking about spotlighting some of our manufacturers and solutions and what their impact is out into the buildings and into the community. So today we have Mohammad Zaidi with Cougar USA. He's our mechanical engineering salesman. Focuses on some of our mechanical products like boilers, cooling towers, and pumps. And we're going to be talking about the AHR Expo coming up, some of the new technology and other things that we want to check out there, as well as industry trends that we're seeing like electrification and the impact that's having on boiler plants specifically. So also going to be talking about our boiler manufacturer partner, Fulton Boilers, and how their innovative technology and controls can really help integrate all of these new technologies that we're seeing. On Building Value, we highlight the people, products, and solutions making a lasting impact on our community. Join us as we share insights and stories from the people that make buildings work. Cool. Mohammad, why don't you tell me a little bit about your background and how you ended up here at Cougar?
Cool. Yeah. So, again, my name is Mohammad Zaidi. I was born and raised in the Houston area. Went to UT. I know not everyone here is.
We are willing to look past that. It's okay.
The resume was good. So graduated from UT and actually studied civil engineering there. Did that for a year and a half, and then took some time off, took a gap year, and traveled and did some other kind of activities, and then started at Cougar in June of 23, so almost 2 years ago now. And I'm the mechanical engineering sales rep, so I handle all of our mechanical products, so boilers, pumps, cooling towers, the whole gamut. So usually I work with engineers in the plan and spec space, getting our products specified and then making sure they're used correctly. But I also get involved in the aftermarket, looking at existing buildings, walking the jobs with our aftermarket guys, and then occasionally, work with our contractors as well to make sure that they understand everything that's going on.
Yep. No, it's been awesome having you. I'm curious about the gap year. So like, where did you get the, kind of the fire to go take a year off and travel?
Yeah, absolutely. So, my older brother, he's about 7 years older than I am. He is actually a digital nomad, so he just kind of does whatever he wants from his laptop, works from his laptop and does whatever he wants wherever he wants.
Nice.
So I kind of wanted to do that similar kind of thing, and so took a year and a half off and took a road trip. Right.
Yeah.
Trips.
Okay.
Took a road trip. Went overseas to a couple of places. Did a lot of traveling, backpacking, staying in hostels, the whole nine, and then did some volunteering at the end of that. So it was
very cool.
Yeah, a lot of good.
What would be your favorite place that you went during that gap year?
I don't know if it's cliche. I would say Thailand. Thailand is.
I bet it's cool. Yeah.
Yeah. Very good food and very nice people, nice beaches and mountains.
There you go.
Very nice place. If you have the time, I would say for sure Thailand is the way to go. But I'll probably go back to the first one I'll go back to of all those places, probably Tanzania, where I volunteered.
Very cool.
For a few months. So visit those people. So
very cool. Yeah, it's very unique for, I think that's a lot more popular in other parts of the world where people go, take some time off and travel, maybe not so much here. So definitely a unique experience.
Absolutely.
Give you a little bit more of a world view, even though you're, a little bit younger of a gentleman. So very cool. Well, I want to talk a little bit about what's going on in the industry right now, kind of what's hot.
Yeah.
Not as cool as traveling to Tanzania or Thailand, but we do have a trip coming up to Orlando, Florida next month, for the AHR Expo. So last year was your first time checking it out. What were your thoughts about the show?
Yeah, absolutely. I thought AHR was very interesting. To see all the manufacturers have their equipment on display, both the manufacturers represent and even some of the manufacturers that we compete with, just seeing what different manufacturers' kind of pitches are, what the directions that they're going in. Obviously we're talking mostly about Fulton, but we also represent Grundfos, right? Seeing the almost direction that those two manufacturers are moving toward, with things like electrification and stuff like that. I thought it was very interesting. But just in general, to see kind of everybody have their booth and be able to spend time with the manufacturers, and then obviously go to events after hours and all that stuff it was a great experience.
Yeah, it's hard to appreciate the scale until you get there, right? Like it's one of the largest, if not the largest, HVAC show in the world, and people come in from all over the world to go to the show. And so, to see that many booths, that many manufacturers, definitely overwhelming. I don't even think I got close to walking the entire show last year.
Right.
To definitely take a couple of days. So, very cool. So, what are you looking forward to for this year at the show? Anybody in particular you want to go check out? Any things you're looking for?
Yeah. So, I mean, right, for anybody watching, right now, what we do on the mechanical side is, pumps, boilers, cooling towers, things like that. Hydronics and steam, pretty much. And we don't have any refrigerant-based pieces of equipment or anything on the air side. But I think starting to look toward that direction of, okay, maybe a heat pump or something like that, right? And we're talking about Fulton today. Fulton's coming out with a heat pump probably by the end of the year. So, we'll obviously learn more about that as it comes out. But looking towards kind of new pieces of equipment and just, again, reconnecting with the manufacturers, familiar faces, and the Super Bowl.
It is, yeah. It's Super Bowl Sunday to kick it off. Yeah. So, and this year should be a good one. So I always love to see what the newest pieces of technology are that we see at the show. So, electrification definitely been a trend that we've been seeing over multiple years. Heat pumps have been dominant at these shows. Seems to be a lot of different options there. So definitely interested to see kind of who's rising to the top of that technology. But when we talk about electrification in general, that's something that's in a lot of ways code-driven and market-driven. And here in Texas, not necessarily code-driven as much, right? We actually have a ban on bans here in Texas. So we're not going to see it from a regulatory perspective anytime soon, and we're going to be driven away from fossil fuels. But the coastal markets, definitely moving that direction. Right. And where we see it is that indirect push, right? So we're seeing manufacturers coming out with these. So, what have you seen locally in our market from customers or engineers in terms of electrification needs?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, it's a great question. And I think to kind of understand that fully, we kind of need to zoom out. So if we take a look at like the history of heating boilers, right? You had, first off, non-condensing boilers basically means that the flue gas in the boiler is not condensing, and it has to do with the operating temperature of the water side. Then you go to condensing boilers, right? So much more efficient, right? The step up.
Yeah, recovering that heat out of the condensate.
Right. Still some gas emissions, right? And then now you see going from non-condensing to condensing to now electric boilers or even like air source heat pumps, right? For heating that heating hot water. So right now in the Houston market, there's still a lot of fully non-condensing boiler plants installed, and even in the new construction in some places you see hybrid plants with condensing and non-condensing, or even just sometimes fully non-condensing, right? And so I think right now, kind of also being in the oil and gas capital of the world, really, we're still seeing most owners use natural gas fired equipment.
Sure.
But condensing boilers are the majority of it. But just kind of to show you about where the market's at, right? And still some ways to go before the full electrification of these hydronic systems. But I think we will start to see more of that in the next few years. Right. You have some owners that are already making the push toward, heat pumps instead of boilers, right? And you'll see probably a combination eventually, I think, of heat pumps, maybe electric boilers and heating boilers all in the same plant.
Right.
Which Fulton is looking to develop their kind of technology toward that.
Right. And I think, one of the kind of phrases I've heard that I really liked was decarbonization doesn't mean decentralization, right? Like we can still have a central plant and generate the BTUs there and distribute them out. We just need to, maybe have multiple inputs, like you said, depending on how we want to generate it, what times, or what the needs are. So one of the things that I think has been a surprise is, how much electricity it's going to take to replace those natural gas loads. And, you're looking at existing buildings, that infrastructure may not be there. So definitely going to be a challenge to jump from where we are in terms of, gas fired condensing or non-condensing all the way over to strictly electric.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. So and Fulton has a lot of great content on this about kind of the tiers of the electrification, right? There's the initial cost and kind of the carbon emissions that come from a natural gas condensing boiler plant. Then there's a hybrid natural gas, and by hybrid I mean condensing boiler and electric boiler, or condensing boiler and say heat pumps. And then there's the fully electric option. And so if you go look at those tiers, the installation gets more expensive as you go on, right? And what a lot of people don't think about is that the operating cost also gets more expensive, right? The cost of a BTU electric, or if you're using an electric option, is more expensive than it is if you're using a gas option.
Sure.
Right. And so I think that's the feasibility of the electrification is a concern in itself, but also the cost of it too. And I think what Fulton has kind of pushed, and what we found to be, is that the happy medium is that hybrid approach with both a natural gas boiler and an electric boiler, where you have an electric boiler that's carrying the load for most of the year when it's not cold, and then times like this when it's starting to freeze outside, you have your natural gas boilers kind of kick on and do the work.
Sure, that makes sense. Yeah, I think it's going to be an interesting journey to kind of see how that goes, especially in an area where it's more market driven than code driven. Hopefully end up with the most efficient solution, like what you're talking about, not necessarily one that just meets a code.
Right.
So we've mentioned it a couple times, but we also want to talk about Fulton today, kind of spotlight them as one of our manufacturing partners. So we've been with Fulton about 2 years now, and really, really excited to have them as a partner, and been really impressed with just the company in general and their controls. Something that we always pride ourselves on is the controls of our equipment. So really excited about their capabilities. And, I was looking today, their cell rating 75 years of innovation. So it's from 1949 to 2024. So a company that's been around a little bit, and, still has some tricks up their sleeve. So what's your experience been? I know you've worked a lot with Fulton. So what's your experience been?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So again, I mentioned it at the kind of start of the pod, but the Fulton is one of my main manufacturers that I work with, right? It's both specifying with consulting engineers, then also in the aftermarket and so on and so forth. And honestly, I would say they are, anyone in the rep world knows that manufacturers have a varying level of how easy it is to work with them. And I would say Fulton is by far the easiest, right? So
They've been great.
Yeah, you talk about responsiveness to emails, fixing problems, things like that. They've been absolutely great. And so we have them both on the steam and hydronic side of things, right? And so I know I'm most talking about heating today, but we do also have that offering. But yeah, Fulton's been great. Again, innovative products, right? Both trying to be the top of the line product for the condensing boilers, but then also coming out with new products like electric boilers, heat pumps, and creative solutions to how to integrate all of that. Right. I had the privilege of going to Fulton's, national sales meeting, in October, I believe it was. And, I met a guy who used to, rep another boiler manufacturer. Not gonna name him. Cougar may or may not have repped him once upon a time. And he was saying that, that manufacturer, not nearly as innovative. It's more so, we're doing it this way. It's whether you like it or not, right? And Fulton has listened to the reps, gotten feedback from what's being wanted in all these markets, and, trying to listen to that and actually put that together into their offering.
Right. Yeah. And I think back to kind of their beginnings, and I think it's kind of rooted in that so it was Louis Palm that started Fulton, and he was managing a laundry facility, and their boiler went down, and he had the idea that he could build a better one. And that resonates with us, because that's how we got into some of the things that we do with our own controls, having this idea that we could do it on our own. So I think that you're still seeing that with what you're saying, that they're still trying to look forward, build better products, and kind of build on that legacy that they have. So the one that we mentioned a couple of times, the Endura ZE, so the new electric boiler that is out, right? So that's the next biggest product. So tell us a little bit about that one, and then I'd also like to talk a little bit about the controls and kind of how integrating all of those different BTU sources into the loop.
Sure. Real quick, I do want to tell a funny story about Louis Palm, the founder of Fulton. So they started off making boilers, their classic boiler, they call it, which they still have basically the same boiler that they sell to dry cleaners. So they had, I think, the second one they ever manufactured 70 years ago. They sold to a dry cleaner in New York. was still running like as of last year.
That's crazy.
And so then they told the guy, we'll pull it out and give you a new one. We just want to put this one on display as a 70-year-old boiler. The guy didn't want to. I don't know why. You get a new boiler for free, but also they did end up switching those out. But to kind of show you how long this products last.
That's impressive.
Funny story about the start. But you were asking about the Endura ZE. So the Endura ZE is basically like any other Fulton boiler, right? Just comes in the same
cabinet shape,
fits through a 3-foot door, same kind of look and feel to it, right? It has the same pure control that all the other Fulton boilers do. So some background on that, it's basically the controls integration of a whole boiler plant, just basically on the boiler without the need of a standalone control panel.
Right.
And so what that does is it enables a couple things. I guess it allows the boilers to sequence themselves locally by themselves, talk to each other. But then also, like if in the event that one of those boilers goes down, or you say your lead boiler goes down, you don't lose your whole boiler plant, which is something that most manufacturers don't have the capability.
Kind of a masterless control system.
Exactly right. And so the Endura ZE, again, has the same feel as all the rest of the boilers, and has that same control interface. And they have it from 400,000 BTUs per hour to 2 million BTUs per hour.
Yeah, it's a big range.
Yeah, it's a big range.
Yeah, and what's interesting about the electric boilers is the turn down and the efficiencies are very high for both, right? So mentioned earlier that cost might be higher because of the inputs into it, but ultimately it's an extremely efficient way of doing heat transfer.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely. Yeah. So I mean, they have pretty much a 100-to-1 turn down, right? And then also 99% efficiency, right? So very little energy losses, and basically what you get on the nameplate is what you're going to get out of the boiler.
Right. And so with that turn down, it allows the boiler to basically match the load, right? So you're not under or over producing the amount of heat that you need, right? You can dial in exactly almost what you need for the output. So I mean, comparing to a gas-fired unit, that's a significantly higher turn down.
Right. And then we were talking about earlier using electric boilers to carry the load whenever there's not much load, right? Like say when you're just reheating in the summer. Now that makes that a lot more feasible, right? So you have unlimited turn down. So no matter how small your heating load is in the summertime, you can just rely on your electric boiler to do that.
Right. So definitely seeing that as a cool product. Anything else? So you mentioned potentially heat pump. Anything else Fulton has up their sleeve that we're allowed to share?
Yeah. So I mean, other than I guess so we talked about the heating boilers, right? So heating boilers, they have from 400,000 BTUs per hour up to 12 million BTUs per hour, right? So a wide range there. Electric boilers we talked about. Electric steam boilers also something they're coming out with. The domestic water heater, right, that they're coming out with, going to be from
750 to 2 million, I believe.
Yeah, 750 to 2 million. Same duplex stainless steel heat exchanger, probably the same controls capabilities as before with the Endura, right? So lots of great stuff they're coming out with, and I think what Fulton does really well is their mod sync control panel, which is a standalone control panel, but that can integrate any kind of equipment, right? So a heat pump, it can be again, a gas-fired condensing boiler, electric boiler, you name it, right? Anything that you would need to put in a heating plant, that control panel can integrate all of them together, right? And then the end user ultimately can interface with that panel, but also just go and touch it, right? And just see what's going on with all the equipment there.
Yeah, that again, back to their controls capabilities. I think that's awesome, and for a heating environment that's going to be changing, to be able to take those multiple inputs and ultimately have the same output of a heating loop for the whoever's running the building is going to make that transitional more seamless and easier, give them more options.
Right.
So it's kind of to that point, the last thing that I want to get into today on the podcast is kind of that building value portion of what these boilers and products are actually doing, right? So as one of the things that I've always wanted to touch on with these podcasts is not just what do we do, but what's the impact out into the community, right? So I think especially right now with the cold temperatures in Houston, which maybe not as normal here as they are in other places, but the impact that these products have, especially like in a hospital or school, is ultimately creating comfort heat in these facilities, right? So, I know you've been, either working with some engineers or some end users. Maybe talk a little bit about, that end product out into the buildings. Like, what's the ultimate application or impact that these products have?
Yeah, absolutely. So, to understand the role of a heating boiler, right? It's kind of zoom out and look at a hydronic system in general, right? So hydronic system basically means using water for heat transfer, right? And so we either use it to cool, which is another system that a boiler is not involved in, right? But you either use it to cool the air that's ultimately blown into your room, or using it to heat the air that's blown into your room, right? So that boiler is basically heating, right, that loop of water, and ultimately that loop of water is used to heat the air that's coming in your space. So then when you look at, like, for example, a hospital, like you mentioned, right, having a reliable boiler that's operating, it's not going to fail, in the most dire situation, right, when it's freezing outside, is right imperative for these hospitals, and they absolutely need that reliability and resiliency.
Yep.
And then same again with schools, right? And so being able to have a building that's not getting cold in the freezing time, right? So I mean, I think remember last time whenever all the homes are freezing, and obviously negatively affected a lot of people. So again, right, the how critical the boilers are, right? And so also it's another part of the electrification, right, is having gas on site for a heating boiler can be a little more reliable in some senses than
Sure.
electrification.
Yeah, if you're relying on a generator, I mean, it's going to be tough to have a generator load that can support an electric boiler potentially. Probably a heat pump easier. Water source heat pump going to be operating probably a little easier in the cold temperatures than air source heat pump. But, all of those things ultimately going to be, like you said, impacting whoever's in the space, right? So patients, students, anything like that, we want to keep them warm. And for a lot of people across the country, this type of heating is more common in homes than it is here in the South, right? We're used to, forced air, gas-fired kind of heaters in our attics, not necessarily using hydronic heat in the homes, but for a lot of people, this is how they're normally, heating their houses. So if you've ever used radiant heat, in a cold environment, it's a lot more comfortable, in my opinion, than the forced air heat where you have,
very common in Europe too,
down to 20% humidity or whatever. So the other part of this is the steam, right? So the steam generation side, and I know Fulton can do some really cool things there, is, steam's used a lot in the medical center as a utility, right? So maybe not seeing it there, but there are standalone hospitals or other areas where, you have a lot of food process where you have these steam generation boilers. What are some of the impacts there on the steam side?
Yeah, absolutely. And then, sorry, I don't mean to jump time.
Yeah, go for it.
But I also wanted to mention, right, Fulton also has the Vantage boiler, right? So it's a dual fuel condensing boiler. So that means it can go full time, either natural gas or full time diesel, and even go up to use other fuels like propane and I think jet fuel even in some instances.
Okay, so I don't know when that would be an option, but okay, maybe the airport.
Right, exactly. Literally just that. I took some customers on a factory tour, and that was something I found that was pretty interesting. But that to say all that though. So yeah, a dual fuel condensing boiler that can serve a hospital, and you see some healthcare institutions where that is their design standard to have a dual fuel boiler, right? And so
Makes sense.
Again, having that resiliency, and that they have from 1 million and ultimately going to go up to 12 million in the next year or so. So a lot more exciting stuff coming there. But you were asking about steam, right? So back to the main topic. So Fulton has a wide offering of steam boilers, right? So anywhere from small electric steam generators, right, or steam boilers, to big vertical steam boilers, to even huge horizontal fire tube steam boilers that you might think of traditionally used in
big plants.
Right? All the way to a big flex water tube, their FBX boiler. But what we have seen customers most interested in using is their VSRT steam boiler. That's kind of the good, better, best approach, right? We're talking about different vertical steam boilers. The VSRT, right, standard low NOx, right? So perfect for Texas. High turn down, right? So if you look at a 100 horsepower boiler, or even anything 60 horsepower and up, has a 10-to-1 turn down, right? I'm not getting a little too technical, right? But all that to say is that the VSRT is very high tech, and a lot of Fulton steam boilers are high tech like that. And then again comes that MOTSync control panel. They can provide an entire engineered system, right? Yep. So basically for an engineering, customer, I can get you a skid. You can just drop in your model, good to go, right? Yep. Contractor, it comes assembled. You don't need to worry about messing with any of the preheat piping. And not only that, not only is it us taking care of it, but if there are any solutions, right, it's a single source of responsibility. Issues rather, it's a single source of responsibility. Right. So we can come, we know who's going to solve the problem, right? So
absolutely. And the downstream of those boilers, that steam is used for, it could be used to create hot water for hydronic heating, right? So it could be a different BTU input there. See it for domestic hot water generation, right? Also for you could do sterilization with it as well.
Absolutely.
Right? So that that's critical for those the surgical instruments, things like that, to be able to have good clean steam. So lots of ways that we're seeing both the hydronic heating and the steam kind of impact, especially in the hospitals, patients and things like that. So every time I'm in a hospital, I kind of get to see the other side of that.
Yeah.
So I think it was almost 2 years ago now. I had my appendix out, and so I'm wondering, like, hey, I hope their steam system is good so that these tools are sterile, right? But
I've been thinking about something else while I was going into surgery.
Well, I mean, getting wheeled into the surgical room is overwhelming, right? Like, there's just all kinds of stuff going on. But yeah, that's unfortunately you can't turn that side of your brain off. So I think you
probably had your dad and Scott on the podcast before talking about steam systems, right? So we're kind of known as the steam guys, and when it comes to steam boilers, right, that's been a seamless transition, right? Knowing now knowing the entire system, but also being able to provide the entire system.
Sure.
A single source of responsibility for all the steam on a job for, again, engineers, contractors, owners, the whole nine.
Right, because we used to say we do everything after the boiler, and now we can do everything.
Exactly.
Awesome. Well, Mohammad, it's been a great conversation. Anything that we didn't touch on? Any kind of last bits on Fulton or just marketing in general?
I think this might just be me being a salesman, but I did want to include Fulton has a local steam facility.
True.
Where they manufacture steam boilers, but also put together skids. The engineer systems that they do. Have a lot of boilers there, steam boilers there in stock, right? So that will be interesting for anybody to see who's interested. And then they also, from there, have techs, right, that can provide local support on all of the steam boilers. And then we at Cougar have techs who are certified to work on steam boilers, condensing boilers, right? And so if that gives anybody any peace of mind, right, we're able to do that.
Absolutely. So yeah, definitely looking forward to making it out to AHR Expo soon. Absolutely. To check all this out and continuing to kind of further our relationship with Fulton.
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. I want to thank you for coming on podcast today, sir. Well done. It's the first time. I also want to thank everyone for watching and listening to this episode of Building Value, and we hope to see you on the next one.